Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Mark didn't have many luxuries during college. He shared a cramped room with another student, lived on a tight budget, and spent most weekends working shifts as security at a bar near campus. The job was simple: control the entrance, calm down drunk troublemakers, and occasionally handle more delicate situations. It was on one of those nights that he saw Lori for the first time. She had drunk more than she could handle. She was with a group of friends, and at first seemed fun, spontaneous, even charismatic. But as the night wore on, she started losing control. Her friends scattered, some left, and Lori ended up alone, sitting on the floor in a side hallway of the bar, eyes downcast and makeup smeared. There was no glamour there. Just a fragile young woman, exposed, trying to look strong while the world spun too fast for her to keep up. Many passed by pretending not to see her, others laughed. Without thinking twice, Mark walked over and asked if she was okay. She tried to respond, but her voice barely came out. He helped her stand up, got her a glass of water, and called a taxi. Even though he didn't know her, he waited outside until the car arrived. Before she left, he handed her a piece of paper with the bar's number and told her she could call if she needed anything. Lori just nodded silently, holding the paper like someone clinging to a thin rope before falling. 2 days later, she showed up at the bar again. This time she was more sober, more composed. She looked for Mark and found him outside checking people in. She thanked him. Said that help meant more than he could imagine. And, somewhat awkwardly, asked if he wanted to grab coffee sometime. The invitation was simple, direct, but different. It didn't seem like a game or strategy. Just a genuine attempt to get to know someone who, by chance, had been kind at exactly the right moment. They began meeting casually. First quick coffees between classes. Then longer walks, conversations about the future, the fears each quietly carried. Mark was surprised by how Lori saw the world. She was intense, full of ideas, sometimes impatient, but had an energy that pushed everything around her forward. He, on the other hand, was calmer. He watched, thought things through, avoided rushed decisions. And maybe it was this contrast that made them grow close so quickly. Their relationship lasted until the end of college, and shortly after they decided to get married and live together. Mark landed a steady job at a property security company. Lori, after trying a few internships, was hired by a marketing firm. Starting adult life was challenging, but there was teamwork. They split bills, responsibilities, and also dreams. Lori talked about traveling to other countries, starting her own business, living a more comfortable life. Mark, although he dreamed less big, also wanted to grow. He just believed in solid steps, one at a time, not risky jumps. As the months went by, their differences became clearer. Lori started showing increasing dissatisfaction. She thought the apartment was small, the car basic, the clothes repetitive. She began suggesting Mark ask his parents for help, they were in better financial shape. He refused. He believed building something with effort was what made everything feel real. Lori disagreed, thinking life was too short to be lived saving every penny. Conversations that once flowed easily now ended in heavy silence. Still, Mark kept pushing. He remembered the girl sitting on the bar hallway floor, the courage it took her to come back and thank him, the way her eyes lit up talking about new ideas. He believed, with patience, everything would adjust. That she was just tired from routine, work pressure. He tried surprising her with simple dinners at home, short weekend trips. But Lori seemed increasingly distant. She was physically present, but absent in her gaze. She traded time with him for extra hours at work, always justifying with goals and deadlines. Mark started suspecting something. Not out of jealousy, but instinct. There was a discomfort growing inside him, a feeling he tried to ignore but kept coming back every night. Lori avoided physical contact, reacted impatiently to any personal questions, and in certain moments, seemed like a completely different person. Still, he tried to justify it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe she had problems she didn't want to share. One night, she came home late. Said she had dinner with an important client. Mark listened carefully, trying to believe. But something inside him, for the first time, couldn't accept the answer. And that was the exact point where everything began to change, even if silently. The story that began with an act of kindness now slid into uncertain territory, where love was no longer enough. Mark didn't know what was coming. But for the first time, he began preparing himself to face the truth. And that truth wouldn't come as a shout, it would arrive as a persistent whisper refusing to go away. Mark spent days trying to suppress the feeling that something was off. He tried distracting himself with work, with the few friends he still kept in touch with small home projects, but nothing was enough to quiet that voice bothering him more and more. Lori seemed busier, more distant. She answered his questions automatically, like someone speaking out of obligation. Her eyes no longer searched for his with interest, and her smiles carried the weight of rehearsed scripts. It was like she was only there out of habit, fulfilling a role beside someone she no longer shared her heart with. One night, Mark woke up because of a phone notification from Lori's phone. She had forgotten it in the living room, and the sound woke him. He hesitated for a few seconds, then stood up and walked to the couch. The screen showed a short message from someone saved only as B. The message read, "Dreaming about me again?" Mark stayed there for long seconds, staring at those words. He put the phone back where it was and returned to the bedroom without waking her. But from that moment on, his mind found no rest. In the following days, Mark started observing patterns. Lori always kept her phone face down. She only answered calls when she was outside. When he approached, she quickly shut down her laptop. Her excuses for going out were getting more elaborate and, at the same time, colder. It was almost like she no longer cared about sounding convincing. And that hurt him the most, realizing that, perhaps, she no longer cared whether he found out. Mark didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to cause drama, but he needed the truth. So he bought small listening devices and installed them carefully. One inside her purse, another under the sofa where she usually talked on the phone, and a third hidden in the car. He did this with trembling hands, chest tight, stomach turning. It was the first time he violated her privacy, but he felt there was no other way. He needed certainty about what his eyes already suspected, but his heart still resisted accepting. The first recordings were vague, superficial. Some voice messages, laughter, normal conversations. But then came the audio with a name, Blake. His voice was confident, secure, and Lori sounded different when speaking with him. More relaxed, more involved, more alive. In one of the recordings, she said she was tired of the same old life and felt trapped in a small existence. Mark listened alone, in the car, eyes watering, face expressionless. Another audio turned his stomach. Lori said Mark was a good man, but dull, living a mediocre life, and that she needed to feel admired. Blake agreed with everything, teasing her, saying she deserved more and should get out of that bubble before it's too late. The conversations hadn't yet crossed a physical line. The tone was emotional, intimate, almost like two teenagers discovering a secret shared only between them. But for Mark, this hurt more than any physical betrayal. He now understood Lori had formed a new connection, one that completely excluded everything they had built together. One that disrespected his efforts, his sacrifices, everything he had done to keep the marriage standing. During one of these listens, Lori told Blake about a dinner Mark had prepared. She laughed. Said he was predictable, insisting on keeping a flame alive that had already died out. Blake responded mockingly. That broke Mark inside. It wasn't just betrayal. It was contempt. It was the realization that she no longer saw him as someone worthy of respect. Despite the pain, Mark kept recording for a few more days. He wanted proof, but he also wanted to understand what led Lori to that point. The more he listened, the more he realized this wasn't something recent. It was a slow build-up fueled by silent frustrations, subtle pressures, unmet expectations. He understood Lori had given up on him a long time ago. She just lacked the courage, or dignity, to end things before starting another chapter. There was a moment when Mark considered confronting her directly. He grabbed his phone, typed a long message, but deleted it all before sending. He looked at the recordings, the audios saved in folders with dates and times, and realized it wasn't time yet. His pain needed strategy. His disappointment deserved dignity. He wouldn't let himself become the cheated husband screaming accusations. He would be the one who understood, who stepped away, and when the time came to reveal everything, he'd do it precisely, without staining his own hands. But there was still one final chapter to write. And he knew that when the right time came, the words he spoke would be few, but unforgettable. He reviewed every recording. Selected the most relevant parts. Cut out the excess, organized them chronologically. Created a file with date, time, and a basic transcription. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he needed to be ready. He wanted to show that his decision to leave that marriage wasn't based on assumptions. It was based on facts. Truths spoken by her own mouth when she thought he wasn't listening. After that, he drafted the formal divorce document. He asked his lawyer to handle everything with detail. No scandals, no unreasonable demands. A fair division, no fights over assets or public accusations. He wanted it quick, quiet, undeniable. He knew Lori would try to flip the script if he gave her the chance. Knew that at the first sign of emotional confrontation, she'd use tears as defense and guilt as a weapon. But there was no room left for reconciliation. She had erased the bond between them with every word exchanged with Blake, with every laugh at Mark behind his back, with every time she fed a parallel relationship while still wearing her wedding ring. The plan began taking shape when he discovered, through one of the recordings, that Lori would meet Blake on Friday afternoon. It would be away from the office. Disguised as a business meeting. A discreet cafe in a quieter neighborhood. The kind of place that avoids curious eyes. Mark didn't want to see it in person. He had already seen and heard enough. He decided that would be the exact moment to deliver everything. No spectacle. Just the weight of truth, carefully placed on the table. He hired a trustworthy delivery rider. Inside the sealed envelope, he placed the complete divorce paperwork, transcriptions, a USB drive with key audio clips, and a handwritten letter with just a few short, direct lines. He said he knew everything, that he had heard every word, and that despite it all, he chose to walk away without drama. He wrote that what he felt for her had slowly died, not from betrayal, but from the disrespect. And now, only one last gesture remained, freedom for both of them. He sent the envelope to the cafe at the exact time of the meeting. But he didn't stop there. He prepared a second envelope. Identical. Addressed to Blake's wife, whose name he had discreetly uncovered after some research. Inside were the same files, the same letter, with slight changes. The woman, previously unaware of anything, would receive that afternoon the same shock of reality. Mark had no intention of sparking a war. He just wanted all the pieces on the table. Wanted everyone involved to know exactly what was happening. The delivery happened as planned. Mark stayed home, sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for a reaction. And it came. Lori arrived just before sunset. She opened the door without looking at him. Her face was pale, eyes unsettled, hands trembling. She dropped her bag on the couch and stood in the middle of the room, silent. Mark remained seated, staring at the glass of water in front of him. The silence lasted almost a minute, until finally, she opened her mouth. She said she needed to talk. That she was confused. That nothing that happened was planned. She tried justifying the conversations as an event that got out of control. She said she didn't know how he found out, but still believed they could fix things. Mark just listened, silently. When she finished, he stood up, went to the bedroom, and came back with her packed suitcase. It had been ready since morning. He handed it to her along with a copy of the signed document. She cried. Tried to hug him. Asked him to at least listen calmly. Mark took a step back and replied with the only thing that remained to be said, I listened. More than you can imagine. And because of that, it's over. Lori left in silence, carrying the suitcase with the same hand that once held his on their wedding day. The door closed slowly. Mark stayed there, standing, for a length of time he couldn't measure. The house felt bigger, colder, but for the first time in a long while, he took a deep breath and felt the weight lifting from his chest. That story didn't end with shouting or fighting. It ended with a decision. A line drawn between the past and whatever came next. And though it hurt, Mark knew he had done the right thing. Because sometimes, silence is the only way to show how deeply a wound has cut. Mark spent the first days after Lori left in silence. The house was tidy, but he felt messy inside. He slept little, ate poorly, and avoided anyone connected to the past. It was as if, even with the truth exposed, his body was still on edge, trying to process everything. Memories kept appearing, but he no longer felt anger. Just exhaustion. The kind of fatigue that comes after carrying something for far too long. On a random night, he decided to go out. He entered a quiet bar and sat alone until he heard his name. It was Jenna, a friend from college. She noticed his state and took him home without asking anything. The next day, she sent a message. Then another. And another. Until he finally accepted a coffee. Slowly, she became a presence. She didn't push, didn't demand. She simply listened. And that was enough for Mark to breathe again. Over time, they started seeing each other more often. No romance, just calmness. Jenna talked about the present, not wounds. That gave Mark the space he needed to heal. One day, she asked if he still believed in love. He said he was relearning. And she smiled. While Mark rebuilt, Blake paid the price. On the day his wife received the envelope, she went straight to his office. Made a scene. Yelled, played the audio in front of co-workers, and walked out. Blake was suspended and soon fired from the company. Lori also lost her job. They tried staying in touch, but became two broken pieces trying to support each other. They disappeared from sight. Weeks later, Mark received an unexpected email. It was from Lori. The subject was simple, if you still want to understand. He hesitated, but clicked. She wrote that she loved him from the beginning, but over time, started feeling like she wasn't good enough. She said the fear of failing made her seek validation elsewhere, and that she ended up losing herself trying to feel alive somewhere else. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Just tried to explain. Mark read until the end, closed the screen, and stayed silent. He didn't reply. That didn't change anything. The pain had passed, the damage was history. The truth was just another puzzle piece he no longer needed to fit together. He realized peace doesn't come from answers, but from stopping the questions. Jenna called him for another coffee. He accepted. Not to escape the past, but to keep living without dragging what no longer belonged to him. 2 years later, Mark was a different man. With help from a friend in the field, he opened his own private security company. He started with small contracts, working hard every day, often pulling all-nighters to serve clients and organize his team. Slowly, word spread. His seriousness, punctuality, and professionalism caught attention. Within less than a year, his company was serving retail chains, upscale condominiums, and corporate events. He reinvested every penny, grew steadily, but never feared taking the next step. By the second year, the company earned enough for him to buy a spacious house in a respected neighborhood, with a garden and large garage. He traded his old car for a luxury model, elegant and understated, but clearly showing where he had arrived. He started frequenting fine restaurants, both for pleasure and business meetings. He dressed better, cared more about his appearance, but without losing his essence. He remained the same simple man, just now at peace with everything he had overcome. On a regular night, he walked into a high-end city restaurant for dinner with a client. He parked his car in front and was greeted politely. Lori saw him through the window. She was a manager there. Recognized his profile, the way he walked. Her heart tightened. She had already heard Mark had succeeded, but seeing it with her own eyes was different. There he was, the man she had dismissed at the moment he needed her most. She thought about approaching him, but held back. Rushed into a back room and stayed there, silently waiting for him to finish and leave. As he walked out, she peeked through the window. For a moment, she wondered what it would have been like if she had stayed, supported, believed. But the moment passed. Mark left without knowing she was there. And she remained, swallowing the bitter taste of the choices she had made. Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.